Hello everyone, welcome to this session of my NPTEL course Appreciating Linguistics, and we are talking about language typology and cross-linguistic studies in the world's languages. We have had a couple of examples discussed yesterday where you see languages which are not genetically related, without any cultural similarity, also without any language contact, might show certain kind of similarities at the word order level. And on the basis of the data that we had three languages. We had Hindi, Japanese and Turkish, and there we found out that the word order is same in all the three languages. So, it is always subject, object and verb. Then as far as the possessor-possessum relation is concerned, in all the three languages the possessor occurs before then the possessor, and similar is the case with the position of noun phrase and adposition. So, noun phrase always occurs before the adposition, and we have had data from all the three languages. So, what is so interesting about it? If we recall what we were discussing and why Hindi, Japanese and Turkish, these three languages have been considered. The idea here is that these languages, they do not have any shared linguistic environment, right? They also do not have any shared origin or contact or cultural environment. In spite of the lack of share or the lack of language contact or shared origin or cultural similarity, we see that Hindi, which belongs to an Indo-European language family, Turkish, which is a Turkic language, and Japanese, which is an isolate, they have not been in close contact. But besides being not related to each other and without having any close contact, also without having any natural or cultural conditions, any kind of similarity in all of these, like in any of these domains, what is the striking thing? The striking thing is that the word order is same as far as possessor-possessum relation is concerned, subject, verb, object is concerned, and adposition and noun phrase is concerned. So, then the concern here is, the question here is that there must be some kind of similarity or some kind of trigger which helps us, or which we need to understand, in spite of not having any kind of cultural, geographical or regional or genealogical similarity. These languages also show certain cross-linguistic similarities. So, that means there are structurally we can think about certain styles or certain phenomena which are going to be available across languages. We are going to go into these discussions when we talk about, like when I discuss language and linguistic universals, maybe after a couple of sessions. So, this was the story of Hindi, Japanese and Turkish, one Indo-European language or Indo-Aryan, if I can say. Then there is a Turkic language and Japanese, which is considered to be an isolate. All of them, they have certain shared features. On the other hand, we had languages like Arabic and Rapa Nui. So, these two are also genetically unrelated. So, the correlation between Rapa Nui and Arabic, I do not think you would find out any kind of difference between these two languages. However, if you look at the word order and the same possessor-possessum relation, Arabic and Rapa Nui, they would come under one type. Hindi, Japanese and Turkish, they are going to come under the other category or the other type. So, type 1 and type 2. So, with these informations on the empirical and linguistic data that we have, now let us find out how does the concept, or how should we understand the cross-linguistic similarities. So, when I say there is a cross-linguistic similarity, what do you understand by that? What do I aim at? And what could be the possible reasons for cross-linguistic similarities in the world's languages? If you can recall, I was talking about four major reasons which could lead to, or which could trigger, or which could be the reason of cross-linguistic similarity. The first one is shared inheritance. So, when you say shared inheritance, two languages that I would like you to think about, they are English and German. So, both English and German, they belong to Germanic family of languages. Okay? And why would we call them that, or why would we consider them having the shared inheritance? Because both the languages, both English and German, they inherited the words, a lot of words from the Proto-Germanic language, which actually is considered to be having a shared ancestral language. So, Proto-Germanic, which is an ancestral language for both English and German, which is why the word for bread, that is same in English and German. So, if you look at the inheritance, or if you look at how the languages have been branched out from a bigger node, or from a bigger domain, or from a bigger tree, then you can find out that English and German, they would be sister languages. And why they would be considered as sister languages? Because of the shared ancestral language that they have, which is Proto-Germanic. So, the first reason of the cross-linguistic similarities that we have listed here is shared inheritance, the first point. What is the second point? The second point is language contact. As I have just mentioned a while ago, because of the geographical proximity or the regional proximity among languages, you might see some sort of similarity emerging within the languages. So, in this connection, I would like to draw your attention to languages like English and Swahili. So, they do not have any shared ancestry as such, but what is so similar, because they have certain kind of language contact, and since both the languages have adopted the words, like let us say sugar. Sugar is a word which is same for English as well as Swahili, primarily because of their connection with Sanskrit. So, because of the language contact, both Swahili and English will have certain kind of similarity. So, second reason of cross-linguistic similarity is what? It is language contact. So, if we try to explain cross-linguistic similarities, we have to list down the multiple reasons that we have in hand. Now, let us move to the third one. So, what is the third one? The third reason of linguistic similarity or cross-linguistic similarity would be shared environmental conditions. So, when you say shared environmental conditions, then let us find out how the languages they can have similarities in the like because of the sharing cultural or environmental conditions that they have. So, let us look at the examples, or let us look at not the examples, I will just tell you the names of the languages which have cross-linguistic similarities because of the environmental conditions, and that is Japanese and Gugu Yimide. So, these are the two languages which have what? They have the alternate words where, let me read it, alternate words where the choice between them depends on the social relationship between the speaker and the addressee. So, what do they do? What is so striking, or what is so important to discuss about these two languages? These two languages, Japanese and Gugu Yimide, they have alternative words, and they can choose either of them depending on the social relationship between the speaker and the addressee. Okay? Maybe I will give you an example from Hindi, that will be easier for you to understand. I am talking about a family relation or kinship relation, as we say it in linguistics. So, in the kinship relation, there are certain cultures where your father's elder brother would be addressed as Bade Papa. So, that means big father, okay? Father's elder brother, that's the kinship relation, that's the term we used for we use for this kinship relation. Then the second one is there are certain other places, especially in the areas of or in the states of Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, there is a term called Tauji. So, Tauji is also meant for is the word which is used to address father's older brother, right. So, it depends on the cultural choice, or it depends on the cultural environment where the speakers have two different words and they can alternatively use it. If it's a state like Rajasthan, then it could be Tauji, or Uttar Pradesh it could be Tauji, and if it is a place like, let us say, some parts of Uttaranchal, I think, or some parts of Bihar, a lot of people also address father's older brother as Bade Papa. So, that means this cultural environment that, or the environmental conditions that people use to communicate between the speaker and addressee, it depends on the cultural condition that they have. So, cross linguistically, if we bring in the examples from the world's languages, then one is Japanese, the other one is Guku Imeder. So, these languages, they have alternative words where the speakers have the liberty, or depending on the environmental condition, the social relationship, depending on the social relation between the speaker and the addressee, they choose the words. So, then why does it happen? That is the question. And why does it happen? It happens because of the distinctions evolved in response to the demands of the stratified societies. So, what do we mean by stratified societies? Where there are many levels or many varieties, or there are, this is not homogeneous, but the heterogeneous societies where honorification has been at different levels, or addressing has been at different levels. So, considering both Japanese and Gugu Imeder, they, in both the languages there is a distinction distinction in response to the demands of the stratified societies. The speakers have the liberty to choose either of the words as far as the speaker and addressee is concerned. So, that is about the shared environmental conditions. So, this is the third point. And what is the fourth point? The fourth point is depending on the types of language. So, reference to, if I read it, then it will be by reference to language types. And these language types would help us to understand, in spite of having no language contact, no shared genealogy, and let us say no similarity in the cultural components, how come languages, they have certain kind of similarity at the structural level. So, here I would bring in the examples of Hindi and Japanese. So, let us recall the data that we had for the possessor and possessum. I told you in Hindi and Japanese, in both the languages, the possessor occurs before the possessum. So, what does the possessor whether it is different from English or it is similar to English, you think about it and let us know. But I think I gave you the example, the girl's mother. So, when I say girl's mother, who is the possessor? It is the girl, and who is the possessum? It is the mother, right. So, in both Hindi and Japanese, the possessor comes before the possessum. So, that is a similarity which we have between these two languages, in spite of not having any kind of shared genealogy, cultural components, or language contact. So, then now the question arises, why does it happen? Why do you think this is this kind of a similarity occurs? The reason is that the possessors are dependents and the possessums are heads, and both languages are of the dependent and head type. So, if you look at the type, if you look at the category of a particular language, then both Hindi and Japanese, they belong to one type. And what is that type? Dependent and head. And this dependent and in this type of dependent and head category, it's the dependent that that happens or that occurs before the head. So, the head is the possessum and then the dependent is the possessor, right. So, how does it work? It goes with the dependent and head type. So, these are the four, so kind of if I put it together, or if I try to rephrase, or if I would help you to recall what we have discussed as far as cross-linguistic similarities are concerned, we realized that, or we listed that there are four major types, or sorry, there are four major reasons. The first reason, because of the shared inheritance, we get the cross-linguistic similarities. Examples: English and German for the word bread. Second, language contact. English and Swahili, they have similar word for sugar, and that's the example which we need to sort of think about when we are trying to discuss cross-linguistic similarity because of language contact. And third reason, shared environmental conditions, and here we have languages like Japanese and Gugui Midir. So, they have the speakers here, they have the liberty to choose alternative words on the basis of, or depending on the situation, or depending on the condition that they are involved in. And the fourth type, reference to language types. In spite of not having any kind of cultural similarity, language contact and shared genealogy, languages like English and Japanese will belong to one particular type, and that type here we have discussed dependent and head relation. In both the languages, the dependent occurs first and the head comes later. There could be more reasons to it. My suggestion for you would be to read Moravcik's book, Introducing Language Typology, published by Cambridge University Press, for better information, or to know more about the data points that have been discussed over there. But these are the primary reasons, or these are the primary explanations that we can invoke, or which can be invoked if we try to find out the cross-linguistic similarities. Okay. So, now since we realize that there are certain things called language cross-linguistic similarities, now the question that strikes to our mind is that, are these similarities do these similarities hold true for all languages? Do you think all this possessor-possession relation that we were talking about, dependent head relation that we are talking about, do you think these are going to be the same for all languages? Or if this is not same, because we have already discussed there are some differences, is there any similarity that is found across the languages, or is there any linguistic phenomenon that you can identify which is going to be the same in all the languages, right? So, that would be called as universals, or the linguistic universals in that sense, or you can, there are two, language universals and linguistic universals are sometimes different, but to put it, considering the course is linguistic typology, I am going to talk about the language universals here. Okay. So, now since we are, what should be our next question, or what should be our agenda of discussion? Let us find out if there is anything or any feature which is available in all languages. Okay. So, one point that you should remember, at least there is one thing which is found across languages, is personal pronouns. Okay. I would not say all languages, rather I would say, following Moravcik's claims, all known languages as of now. No linguist claims that all the languages in the world have been identified or discovered or found out, may or may not be true. There could be languages which the linguists have not come across with. It must be like, there could be languages which are spoken by like super tiny small minority communities somewhere in the world, somewhere in the globe. So, let us focus on the term all known languages. So, this is what I would circle for you, this is important. So, instead of saying all languages, we would rather say all known languages. So, at least one linguistic universal that you need to remember is the availability of personal pronouns in all the languages. Okay. So, then what should we infer from here? If the question is, if let us say I'm raising a question here for all my participants, why do all known languages have personal pronouns? Can you think about the answers? Right. So, if it is a question, we should try to answer it, and how the answer has been discussed here. If we follow the genetics, like the reasons of cross-linguistic similarity, we'll apply one by one. What could be the possible explanations? Okay. Let's recall, what was the first reason of cross-linguistic similarity? Shared genealogy, okay, or the shared inheritance. What was the second reason? Language contact. What was the third reason? Cultural conditions. And what was the fourth reason? Language type. So, now if the question is why all languages have personal pronouns, there could be any of this or all of the answers might hold true. It could be somebody might answer or somebody might tell that okay, all languages have personal pronouns because all languages are genetically related and the ancestral language from which they derived, they had personal pronouns. That is the reason number one, because shared genealogy is one of the first and the foremost reasons that that triggers similarity. So, going by that, our argument is that all languages are genetically related and the ancestral language from which all the languages have been derived, they have personal pronouns. That is why all the languages in the world have personal pronoun. This is one set of argument. What is the second set of argument? The second set of argument is all languages have been in direct or indirect contact with each other and the presence of the personal pronouns has spread from one to the other. So, that is the second reason. That means, what are we claiming? We are claiming that besides having a common or shared ancestral relation, all languages in the world, they might have had either direct or indirect contact. And because of the direct and indirect contact with each other, the presence of the personal pronoun has spread from one language to the other. That is how we have got personal pronouns in all the known languages of the world. That is the second thing. Third thing, or the third reason, depending on the cultural conditions. So, because all languages are spoken in same cultural conditions, which calls for personal pronouns, the languages in the world have it. Do you think this will hold true? Do you think all languages are spoken in the same cultural condition? We will think about it later, but this could be one potential reason. And what is the fourth one? All languages belong to the same language type, because it depends on the language type or because of the typological similarity, we have the cross linguistic similarities, right. So, do you think, so now let us evaluate the possible explanations. So, these are the four probable explanations. Since we have the probable explanations, now we will try to explain what are the possible explanations out of these. Okay. What does the first one say? Let us look at it. The first one says there is a single source for all human languages, okay, going by the logic of shared inheritance. And if this ancient language has a personal pronoun, all of the daughter languages have retained it. Do you think this is a possible hypothesis? What is your sort of take on this? Do you think all languages, they share similar or the same genealogical ancestry? If we stick to this hypothesis, then it will have two questions. Okay? And what are these two questions? First, okay, let me write it over here. So, the questions here, following the first argument that we had, all the languages have a shared genealogy. First hypothesis is that all the languages, they have a shared inheritance, or there is a proto language or a mother language from where all the daughter languages have evolved. So, if that is the case, then there are two questions that we need to answer. What is the first question? Why did the source language have personal pronouns, right? So, don't you think this is a question worth pondering over, right? So, why did the source language have a personal pronoun? Why not anything else, or why not XYZ, right? Then the second question is, okay, we assume that the source language had personal pronouns. Then the question is, how come only the personal pronouns, obviously with many other linguistic phenomena, survived the millennia? There are many years, millions of years have gone, or it has been a past. So, how come it is only the personal pronoun, along with some others definitely, survived the millennia, but a lot of others or many others could not? So, these are the two questions which I do not think we can answer. So, the first hypothesis has its own challenges, but it is not impossible. So, the linguists would argue that there could be a proto language from where all the languages in the world have evolved. And if that has been something that we would accept, then we also have to answer these two questions, right. Now, what is the second hypothesis? The second hypothesis is that perhaps the personal pronouns first evolved in one language and the idea then spread to the other languages. This could be the second hypothesis, is that it happened to, or it appeared in one language, but because of the language contact and other issues, then it spread to the other languages. This is the second hypothesis. What is the third hypothesis? The third hypothesis is that because of the similar cultural conditions for all languages, in a sense, it's true that all languages share some of their environment. At least one similarity or one shared relation is that all the languages are spoken in a human community. Okay? So, in the considering languages are spoken in a human community, so the environment remains same because of the similarity in the cultural environment, personal pronouns spread from one language to the other. So, these are different hypotheses that we can actually consider to answer such kind of questions. And what is the fourth explanation? The fourth explanation is that all languages have personal pronouns. We must say that they form a single type. That means, all the languages in the world, they can belong to one type. So, these four possibilities or these four hypotheses, they would sometimes, like, they are not impossible, but it is difficult to answer certain emerging questions when you hypothesize one of these. So, these are still, the linguists are working on this, and on the basis of the four possible explanations, we can also go to the fifth one which I did not discuss in this slide. So, the fifth one would be the question here, or what sort of a question do we see in the fifth one? It is written here in this slide. Why do all known languages have personal pronouns? That's the main question that we are trying to understand. So, the fifth one is that because all languages belong to a type of communication system, right, where the presence of personal pronoun is required, personal pronouns is required. So, that is the fifth explanation. So, what is the fifth explanation somehow would summarize all of them. So, the concern here is that because of languages belong to a type of communication system where the presence of the personal pronoun is absolutely mandatorily required. Because of this requirement, we have languages in the world which have personal pronouns, right. So, these are a few answers that linguists would give you to approach or to think about the cross-linguistic similarity in typology literature. So, or if I put it in a brief manner, or in a more condensed form, then I would say cross-linguistic or typologically cross-linguistic similarities are emerged because of these possible explanations, and we have tried to understand how a personal pronoun like I, you, so these kind of, or me or him or her, so these sort of pronouns, why do we find these things available across languages? So, the hypothesis could be any of these 5 that we have discussed. But one thing you need to remember is that because of the availability of this phenomena, or sorry, of this phenomenon, that is personal pronouns across languages, we call it language universal. So, from here onwards I am going to talk about, or I am going to take up issues related to language universals.